sincerely appreciate your support. Lastly, I'd like to thank our organizing committee, comprised of our host, David Urquhart, Chris LaPearl, the technical director, Neil Blunden with all the social media, Ken Moran, executive, Marty Raymond, executive, Earl Zuckerman, social media support and communications, and our FMH president, Mike Nelson. You guys have done a tremendous job putting this event together. A big shout out to Howard Monk too, and FME Sports as our title sponsor. I myself am eager to learn from some of the most talented and storied alumni here at McGill. Thank you everyone for your generosity. Enjoy the event and we have an excellent lineup for you.
Thank you, Liam. So now it's time to introduce our first speaker, and we're really excited to announce Peter Smith. Peter is entering his 21st season as the head coach of the McGill Martlet hockey team. Over that time, his teams have won 4 national championships. The thing that always amazes me about Peter is that even after 20 plus years of coaching, he's always looking to improve. He's always looking to learn new things. At the international level, Peter has won 2 Olympic gold medals as part of the coaching staff of Canada's national women's team at the 2006 and 2010 Olympics. Peter's McGill grad with a degree in physical education and a master's degree in sports psychology. Today, he will be talking about how to build culture through leadership. And just a reminder, while the presentation is going on, please send me your questions via the chat function and we'll get to your questions later on. So without further ado, here's Peter.
Thank you, David. Let me get my screen shared up here and we'll be good to go. Chris, you're gonna activate that for me? There we go. There we go. Should be set to go. So thank you very much. Really, really happy to be here. Unbelievably worthy cause. You know, Nobsy and Roots were good friends. Really miss them, particularly Kelly. Real close to Kelly over the years, having certainly coached together. So really glad that you're all here. Very worthy cause, and a big shout out to Dave and Chris and Liam and others who have made this work. Well done, guys. Also like to, you know, express my wishes that everybody's doing well. Obviously challenging times, particularly for you parents out there. Parents of school-age kids are at home. I know that that's not easy. I speak from experience on that. I don't talk about it much, but I homeschooled my own kids till grade 5. Then they went back into the public system into grade 3. So I hope you're all a lot better at the homeschooling than I was. My background, again, I'll just, you know, I don't want to bore you with details, but there's a couple things that I did want to mention. You know, I'm a teacher first and foremost. You know, professionally, that's what I am. What I do is coach hockey. I played a lot of sports when I was younger. The 3 main sports that I played were football and hockey and swimming. So I got a chance to be involved in team sports and also in an individual sport as well at, you know, reasonably high level. And in football, I really learned about, you know, through the coaching, I learned about structure and planning and organization. Very well organized situation. In swimming, I learned about physiology and technical awareness. And in hockey, I learned mostly what not to do in hockey. Hockey coaching back in the day, in my day, and that's a long time ago, admittedly, was not very good. But all of those things formulated my philosophy, my viewpoint on teaching and coaching and leadership and being a good teammate and particularly on culture. The teams that were successful had really strong culture. Teams that weren't very successful did not have that strong culture. So I've had a long look at culture over the years. I think you know, it's what is, and I'm not going to go into a whole lot of theory here. Dave asked me to talk about what it is that we do in terms of building culture with the Martlet hockey program, and that's what I'm going to talk about. But I think it's important, to talk just a little bit about what is culture and why is it important. And culture for me is a way of life, and whether it's a society, whether it's a team, whether it's a corporation or organization, it's a way of life. It's who we are and what we do. And I think it's important to have a definition to know what culture is, because often it's a term that's thrown around a great deal, but then when it comes down to defining it, sometimes people have a difficulty in defining it. So it's a way of life. And there's lots of literature out there on culture, particularly over the last probably 30 years. There's lots of stuff out there. There's lots of good books on it, lots of good research on it. And I'll give you a couple of my books at the end of the presentation that I've really liked about culture, learn about it. And I think that if you want to get better at it, you want to read about it, you want to talk about it, you want to learn about it. Why is it important? I think it's important. I think culture is hugely important on a team. I think it's a competitive advantage. I think that a team with strong, positive culture over the long run can be far more successful than a team that doesn't have that. And I think that, pardon me, I think it's a catalyst, really, culture. It's a catalyst to get from A to B. And often your B, your A is the start of the season and the B is the end of the season. And the B that you want at the end of the season is to win that championship. And so having that culture is real important. And particularly over a long period of time, the culture that you can have can make a huge difference. There's no getting around it. That talent, skill, a highly skilled team is often going to win. But when you get towards the end of the season, the teams that are competing are often very close in terms of skill level. And what can make a huge difference in terms of success and in terms of outcome can be the culture that a team has. So that's why it's so important to build that culture and to build it over a period of time and to perpetuate that culture from year to year as it goes on. I read a good story the other day about that I'll share with you. It was about Al Arbor and Mike Bossy. Al Arbor was coaching the Islanders at the time. This was, I think, back in 1980. And Mike Bossy was coming in, and he was just landing in New York. And, they had some plans of touring him around the city and all that. And when he got off the plane, he told the people who were picking up, he said, "No, I want to go to the rink. I want to go to the rink right away. I want to see the rink. I want to meet my teammates. I want to be part of it right away." So they brought him to the rink. When he got to the rink, he was kind of on the sidelines a little bit, and the rest of the guys were sort of grouped together. And, some of the guys wondered, who is this guy? And, who does he think he is? And, that kind of an attitude. And they all got changed and gone onto the ice. And first shift, the Bossy's on, he gets crushed in the corner by three pretty big players on that team, Clark Gillies and Denny Pudvay and I can't remember, Bob Nystrom, I think, was the other one. And he injured his thumb. So he had to get off the ice. He went to the training room. And Al Arbor called the whole team off, went into the room. And he talked to them in the room. And what he said was, here's a guy who's gotten off the plane, could have gone into New York City, done the tour. But he wanted to come and be with his teammates. He wanted to come to the one place where he was going to feel where he was safe and accepted. And what happens? He gets mugged. He doesn't get mugged on the streets of New York. He gets mugged here in the rink. So they talked about this a great deal. And from that moment on, it changed the culture of the team. The team was far more accepting. The team was far more inclusive. Those three guys spent the next 10 years protecting Mike Bossy. And it turned out pretty good. When Mike Bossy retired 10 years later, he acknowledged those guys and what it meant to be on the team and how strong the culture was on that team. And he turned out to be a pretty good player. I think he played 10 years. He scored over 50 goals 9 times, and they won 4 cups when he was there. But I just illustrate that story to say how important the culture is. That culture makes a difference. The Islanders hadn't won up until that time. And the time that we invest in the culture is hugely important. And for culture to work, I believe that coaches need to be invested in it. They need to work at it. I think for all of us as coaches, we want to work on the power play and the PK and our neutral zone forecheck and face-offs. I mean, it's really what drives us. It's the interesting part. Um, and it is for me as well. But and sometimes we devalue the importance on working on culture, and culture is going to develop. Culture is going to develop, and as you all know, as you coaches all know, um, if you don't coach them, they'll coach themselves. And the culture that might develop in a vacuum might not be the culture that you want or the culture that you can be successful with. So it needs to be something that's planned. It needs to be something that's organized. It needs to be, as far as I'm concerned, it needs to be something um, that you work on over the course of the season. As we get busy and as we try to manage energy, um, it's tougher to find the time to be able to do that. But nevertheless, I think that it's real important to be able to work on that and not pay lip service to it, and not every team has a mental performance coach now. We have them. We've got two wonderful people who do a great job on it. But you can't just hand off the development of culture to your mental performance people. You've got to be part of it. You got to be immersed in it, and you got to recognize that the importance is there. Through this presentation or over the next few minutes, I will talk a lot about coach and player and team, but I think you could extrapolate that. Not everybody on the call is involved in the game or is coaching the game, but I think you can extrapolate that to being a manager or a supervisor or employee or organization or corporation. I think there are some things that are I think in that world you can get a lot from sport and what happens in terms of building sport from a cultural point of view. Let's just talk a little bit about the Martlet hockey culture, and that's really what Dave wanted me to talk about. I was fortunate. I started 21 years ago, and I started with a program that, although women's hockey at McGill had been around for a long, long time, it had been a club level sport, and 21 years ago it was just starting to be a varsity sport. So I inherited a club level culture and club level players. But the reason that it was advantageous is I got to start from ground zero, and that made a big difference. I got to kind of figure things out as I went along, make some adaptations that I felt were important in terms of our program getting to be a program that people were interested in and was going to have success down the road. And right away, I could see that there was a need for a change in culture. And why? We had real good people, and they wanted to have fun and they enjoyed it, but not necessarily inclusive in nature. It was kind of cliquish, the team. There was no real defined purpose on the team when I started. There was a hierarchy and a sense of entitlement, from the older players. And clearly there was an opportunity there to develop a culture. There was an opportunity to develop the leadership within a program. The hard part was that it wasn't necessarily all of those people who fit into that opportunity to be able to develop. And so what did I do? I had to let some players go. And after the end of the first year, kind of feeling things out a little bit, recruited 11 players for the following year. We didn't have a big roster at that time. We only probably had 20 or 21 players on the team. So recruiting 11 for the following year was obviously huge. But what that did is it gave me an opportunity. And I talk a lot about at the beginning of 21 years ago, I talk a lot about me and where it started, because I was pretty much on my own back then. And as I progress over the years, it's way less about me and it's more about us and them, to be honest with you. But what the opportunity that arose was with those 11 players was to help them to develop and help them to develop as leaders and to develop as cultural architects, and in it together, so that we all built the culture that we wanted to have down the road. The reality is that not all of those 11 players, all of them graduated from McGill. Not all of them made it through their career as hockey players, because every year as we moved forward and moved along, there was still a need for change at that time. That doesn't happen as much, but back then it happened a great deal where new players coming in had, they were better players. First of all, they were more skilled. Also, more committed in terms of what it is that they wanted to accomplish in their careers over at McGill. And the culture that we wanted to develop was really, and I should back up for a second and just say, that there's a lot of different types of culture. And, and again, there's lots of literature out there on culture. There's culture that's a star culture, for example. The culture is based around 2 or 3 star players on the team. There's a culture of bureaucracy and, a culture that's based on rules and regulations and extremely structured and rigid. And then there's a culture called a culture of commitment. And that's really what I was most interested in. What I wanted was to build a culture of commitment. That it was a culture of excellence. It was a culture of the pursuit of excellence every single day, about getting better every day, and for everybody, for the players, for the staff, for the coaches. It's what we wanted, and one of the cornerstones of being able to get there was to make sure that we had people in place who were going to buy into that philosophy of a commitment to be able to get better. We had our negotiables and our non-negotiables. The non-negotiables that we had and the culture that we wanted to develop was, in sort of non-negotiables, I always looked at 3 things as we went along. And the 3 non-negotiables that we had, and this came from the players and the coaches as well, was being classy, being relentless, and being united. Those were the 3 cornerstones that we wanted in terms of the culture. And when we talk about being classy, it meant being humble and being respectful, being a great teammate. That's what it was all about in terms of classy. And being relentless was about working hard. So about working hard, about being gritty, and not gritty in terms of going into the corner and getting the puck, but gritty in terms of resilience. There's lots of good stuff on grit out there. There's a woman named Angela Duckworth. She's done some real good stuff, written a good book. She's got has a couple of real good TED Talks on it. So Angela Duckworth on grit, real good. But that's what we're looking for, the resilience, the ability to bounce back and move forward and get better. And then being united. And the united, what we wanted in terms of being united was a team first attitude, that the team was inclusive, that there wasn't a hierarchy on the team, that there weren't cliques on the team. And this is what we were interested in. So classy, relentless, and united. We've got that up in the room. Every year, things change, but in terms of the culture of the team and the cornerstones of the culture of the team, that remains pretty constant. And I did mention about hierarchy. And I like to say that on our team, part of our culture is that we don't have a hierarchy on our team. And I think that that's an important part of it. And I don't know whether hierarchy is the right term or not. But we do talk about that a fair bit. And on our team, matter of fact, we don't even use the term rookies on our team. Once a player comes into our team, they're in their first year. So we have players that are in their first year, their second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year. We don't call them rookies. And our first year players are part of the team, complete parts of the team. And the reality is in our hockey, often the first year players coming in can be more skilled than some of the fourth and fifth year players. So it's real important that there isn't a sense of entitlement, that the cards are on the table, the players who perform play, but there's an expectation that everybody buys in and everybody works hard. And the expectation for the first year players is the same as the expectation is for our fourth and fifth year players. And I think that entitlement and hierarchy are 2 things that can really destroy a culture on a team or in an organization. That once people feel entitled, and the entitlement, based on, well, I'm in my 5th year, I'm entitled to be on the power play, just doesn't work. And so what we tried to do over the years is build the fact that it wasn't based on entitlement. Your ice time wasn't based on entitlement, that what it was based on was performance. and how you did, how you performed. It was a given that everybody bought in and worked hard. If you didn't buy in and worked hard, you probably weren't going to be part of it. You know, and you know, buying in was such a huge part of it. And if players didn't buy in, then we helped them to figure out how to buy in, or eventually we moved on. You know, another word that's thrown around a lot is values. And I think that it's an important word, but I think you have to be careful with values. And what are real values? So, you know, every team has values, and they're important to have, but values can be somewhat abstract in nature. And sometimes you can hide behind values. So you can say that you have a value, but unless you're following through with it, then it can be a bit hypocritical, to be honest with you. So I'm always careful in terms of using the term value. For example, if you have an organization where you know, your value is inclusivity, but when you walk out into the parking lot and you see reserved parking for the CEO and all the bigwigs of the company, then maybe it isn't really an inclusive culture that you have. So having the value is one thing, but having the behaviors is way more important. And when I talk about negotiables and non-negotiables, we talk about the negotiables about being classy and united and relentless. Those are behaviors. Those are behaviors that you want to have happen. So it's not just something that's talked about. It's what actually happens. And I think it's important to make that distinction. So I talked a little bit about getting the right people, and that you know was a big part of our building process, and it remains a big part of what we do. With our recruitment process in particular. So we wanted to get the right people, and our recruiting process is very profound. We spend a lot of time, we do a lot of background. The campus visit is hugely important. We like it when parents come. We're interested in how the recruits interact with their parents, whether they treat them with respect or not. We watch everything. Everything matters. Big part of our recruiting process is that our veteran players take the recruits for a tour, spend time with them, go for lunch, and that's without the coaches, and that's hugely important. That the recruit gets a chance to open up, the veterans get a chance to see what the recruit is like under a situation where the coach isn't around. Real important process. And so our veteran players are a big part of our recruiting process. We identify the talent and the skill and bring people in, but our veteran players are huge in the process. They get a chance to have an opportunity to give their 2 cents in terms of what they see and how they see things and how they see things fitting in. So I think, you know, that recruitment process is just so important in terms of making sure that you get the people in place. And sometimes, you know, we you know, work hard at getting the right people, and then we work hard at getting the people right and developing, giving the opportunity to incoming players and recruits to be able to develop. So, you know, our adage is that the talent that they bring will get them to the door of the room. It'll get them to the door of the team room. But what determines as to whether they stay in the team room over a long period of time is their adherence to the culture, is to those non-negotiables, is to their behavior. So, you know, is to their buy-in. Are they classy, united, and relentless? That's what's going to make the difference. And for us, we've had players who have probably been more skilled and haven't made the grade because they haven't bought in. And I think that's what's made our culture strong, is that the decisions that we've made in terms of longevity of a career are based far more around character and what they bring than how many goals that they're putting in the net. And that's an important part of it. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we've had lots of competitive success over the years, and we have really good players. But it's getting really good players who have the right attitude that I believe have made the difference in terms of the success of our program. Another thing that, sorry about that. Another thing that we've instituted. So when I first started coaching, there was, it was kind of old school stuff. There certainly was initiation. I guess it bordered on hazing a little bit. I mean, it was nothing too serious, and I kind of watched it a little bit. I mean, I remember when I was a varsity athlete, I went through that. I never really thought it was a big deal, but certainly times have changed in 60 years since I was a varsity athlete. So, and I did watch it, kind of the first couple of years, and I didn't like it. I didn't think it was a good idea. So probably even, ahead of the curve, we made some changes there. But what you needed in terms of making change on that is you needed an alternative. And so the alternative that came up with was a retreat to get the players away at the beginning of the year, away from the rink, away from the hockey, and into a situation where we could do some team building. And so what we did is, I had a buddy who runs a camp down in the Eastern Townships, and was able to wiggle my way into that. And we went down with the team, started off. And I remember the first couple of retreats, it was all, Amy Doyle was my assistant at the time. And it was really all Peter Smith and Amy Doyle were running the whole thing, organizing and cooking the meals and doing it all. And it was good and it was worthwhile, but it's not really the way we wanted it to go. And eventually we got, all of this stuff is a process. And eventually we got to the stage where the players started running the show. And that's really where we are today. It's a very player-driven situation. The players are amazing what they come up with. They do all kinds of activities that are team building in nature, highly competitive in nature. Usually they divide themselves into 4 different teams and 4 different colors. And although there is certainly building cooperation and collaboration that's involved, most of the activities are very competitive. And, that's what players want. Players love it at any level, whether it's the pros or amateurs or kids. They love the competition. And if you can teach through competition, I think it makes a massive difference. Players come up with a schedule, they bounce it off us coaches and what the activities are, and away they go. They'll run an activity, they'll debrief the activity after. There's always learning and discussion that goes on with it. But it's just an amazing thing that happens. And I think it's such an important part of building our team. Our first year players come in, they get a chance to be immersed in the culture of the team. The culture is perpetuated by our veteran players on the team. And the coaches are there to observe and watch. And the observation is hugely important because we get a chance to watch, in particular with the first year players, how they fit in, what they need, what areas are they going to need to help to improve in. And we're not even talking about hockey. We're not talking about shooting and passing and skating here. We're talking about other areas that are going to help them to be immersed within the team and within the culture of the team. And they have lots of fun. They really enjoy it. I mean, I had a player a number of years ago say to me, "Peter, that's the best fun I've ever had without alcohol." And they just enjoy it. They have fun. At the end of it, they write a reflection on it. So every year, so a kid who's in 5th year has written 5 different reflections on what they've learned over the course of the, 5 different team building retreats. And it's revealing. If you go back and read them all, in terms of our first year, leading up to their 5th year, it's really interesting to see what they've learned, what they've accomplished, and how they've developed over their 5-year career with the experience that we've been able to give them and help them with over their career. And we continue that over the year as well. So we don't just let it drop. We continue the team building over the course of the year. We make time over the course of the year, and we've got two mental performance people working with the team, both of whom are interested in team building activities. And so we work on a collaborative effort to come up with some things. But the beauty is that it's still player driven. So although we might come up with some themes or some ideas that might help them, and often the players do it, it's player driven. The players run it. We don't go up and tell them, okay, this is what we're going to do. The players come up with it, and the players love it. And it's an opportunity, and every player does it. This year, we had, over the course of the year, we probably had 6 or 7 sessions over the course of the year where we set aside 40 minutes before a practice or after a practice or whenever it was to run through. And we made sure that everybody had the opportunity within their group. So first-year players got to run things, veteran players. Matter of fact, less of the veteran players. It was more of the younger players who got to run some of these things. And I can't stress that enough. And again, it's one of those things that often, can be the first thing that's sort of cut or reduced as energy management becomes important, as the season progresses and you really want to work on this face-off play or, tune up your neutral zone trap or whatever it is. So, but I would really impress upon you that at those times of the season, it could arguably be even more important to continue to develop that team building and to develop that culture. And there's also another term that's thrown around in team bonding, and that's important too. I consider bonding more of, going out to the bar or, going to a party or whatever. And those are important things too. And I don't think that you can de-emphasize that. I think where we can run into sort of a bit of a stumbling block is if we think that team bonding and getting together and getting hammered replaces team building. I think they're both important. Matter of fact, at McGill, every once in a while we have to remind them to, hey, get out on your own and get going and get out and enjoy Montreal a little bit and get away from the library and the rink and get at it. And some teams, I know they have to rein people back. On our team, we have to remind them every once in a while to make sure that that's done. So it's an important part of it. But I think there's a distinction there that's important as well. How am I doing for time? Geez, I'm moving along. So here, I'll kind of, the other thing is that I think we're important for our culture is building relationships. I can't stress that enough. It's a funny thing on our, we have these themes, as coaches, every player, every practice, every player that we want to touch on every player and every practice. And I think that's real important to do. Sometimes it's hard to do. I make lists actually to make sure I touch on everybody. Somehow on our team, we've developed this thing where, and it's been going on for years, that when the players come to the rink, the coach's office is right beside the team room. The coaches come into the office and say, hello, how's it going? And they all do it. And they've done it for years. And it's great that they do it. I've never told them that they have to do it. It's something that's perpetuated by, the first year I don't know whether the veterans tell the players to do that, but they do. They do come in, and it's great. It's an opportunity to say hello. When the practice is over and they're leaving, they come in and they say goodbye. And I think that's great. And the idea, I guess, behind it is, I heard this term, create a brave space. And, it's a real brave space in the team room. And what we've tried to do is create a brave space in the coach's room as well. And so I work hard at making sure I get to know them. I mean, there's a huge difference in terms of age and generation between myself and the players. So I've tried to make sure that I keep up with what it is that they're doing, have some idea and gain some perspective on it. I make lists. I mean, I got to be honest with you. I make lists of we have copious amounts of info on the players, you know, what their parents' names are, where they work and what they do and what their siblings are and whether they have a dog or whatever it is. And I check on those lists, and, you know, everybody wants to hear their name used. And when you use their name, I think it's great. But if you use their parents' names or you use their sister's name or their brother's, they think that's even greater. Now, you have to be authentic. I mean, I care. Hopefully you all care as well. But I think that building those relationships is huge, and having an open door. Our players learned early that you know, when I comment to them that it was about their performance, it wasn't personal. I remember having a player way back in the day saying to another player, "I don't get Peter. He seems to really like me. He's nice. He's cordial with me. He's friendly, but he doesn't play me." Well, it had nothing to do with me, you know, whether I like the player or not. It has to do with how they perform. And that took a while, again, to build that culture. I'm going to zoom over here a couple of things. I think real important, I guess, you know, generational changes, and, you know, being older, I've had a chance to look at those generational changes as they've gone along. I've tried to keep up with it. I think players today are you know, and again, I hate to generalize because not every player, I try to avoid generalizing, but the environment has changed with players today. You know, they want information. They want to be able to give information. They want information quicker. I think a big part of the change that we've had now is clearly with the internet and the availability of information. So I think that's an important part of coaching and managing that we have that perspective. They want the feedback. They want to be able to give feedback. Another unique thing that we do is every time we go into the room between periods or after a game, I always ask, "So what do you see?" And, you know, at the beginning when I used to do that, very few hands would come up. There, you know, there wasn't the trust. They were nervous about saying something that they, you know, didn't want to, you know, they didn't want to get showing up, if you will. But, you know, over the years, we built the trust, and lots of hands come up, and you know, they sing kind of the same song. They see things that are similar to what the coaches see, but they want to have that input. They want to have that opportunity to be able to express, and they're real profound. They're real good in terms of what they see. And then the final thing that I'll mention, because I think I'm running, I'm probably running, the music's going to start any minute now. I want to make sure that there's time for Mike and some questions and stuff. But the last thing that I'll mention is about developing our leadership. We spend a lot of time in developing our leadership. We have a core group. We meet. Our core group is our captains, yes, but there's more involved in the core group. Usually it's our senior players, so it might be 6 or 7 senior players that are involved in the core group, but we also involve our younger players. So every meeting, we meet at once a week for sure, and almost every meeting, maybe not everyone, but we make sure that our younger players are involved. They get a chance to see what's going on, to be part of the process, to learn. So that leadership development starts as soon as they come in the door in their first year, so that we develop them as they go along. So as we move through their career, they have a complete understanding of our culture, of the buy-in, of the work ethic, and it's our leaders who perpetuate the culture of what happens. So when I said previously, you know, I'll talk a lot about I back 21 years ago, but now it's about we, and it's about them. It's about the players of perpetuating the culture as we go, you know, as we go along and progress over the course of the season and over the course of their careers. And, you know, at these meetings, we'll talk about some logistical things, or we'll talk about some general things, or we'll talk about some leadership development things. I usually ask, how's it going in the room? And they know that I'm not being nosy or, you know, want anybody to tattletale. I'm interested to know. And they might have a particular issue that they want to discuss, and usually we'll discuss it, and I try to make sure that they get the opportunity to deal with it. And usually they want to deal with it, but they might want a little advice on how to deal with it, and they will deal with it. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes they'll recruit a coach's help to be able to deal with a particular situation that might arise. But they want to be empowered. And as you get to a stage where they have bought in and they do understand the culture, and there's a trust and authenticity, then I think that you can give them the opportunity to be empowered. This year we had an unbelievably great.
Peter, I'm just going to jump in there before you get going on that last point. I know you got a couple more really good points. Just in respect of time there, I just want to open it up now. I know you touched on a lot of great transferable things like defined purpose, developing those leaders, cutting the fat, that culture. But now I'd like to bring on, it's a great opportunity here to bring on Mike. I know it's just quick introduction. It's someone with a list of accomplishments, just so long to name that you can't even start, but just multiple gold medal winner, Stanley Cup winner, former McGill defenseman. Mike Babcock is going to step on here. And just one thing that I'd like to say, most people don't know about Mike is that he's always been a tremendous supporter of the McGill men's and hockey programs. Whenever his teams are in town playing Montreal Canadiens, he often stops by to talk to the coaches and players, and they all get a lot out of that. Just him sharing his insight, talking to the guys one-on-one. So now just going to jump in there for him to join Peter for some discussion, and if we have time, we'll jump in for some Q&A with the audience. We'll open up to you guys.
Goody.
Hey guys,
Mike,
thanks for having me on. Peter, unbelievable presentation, by the way. I'm proud of you. I've known Peter, guys, for 38 years, and who I knew then and who the man is now, there's been a journey there. Great presentation. You've been a serial winner for a long time, but I'd like to go a little different direction with my first question to you. Is you've coached now for 22 years there. What, if you broke it into 5-year segments for your own personal growth, what has been your focus? How have you grown? How have you made sure that you've been current? How have you made sure you've maintained a program that's unbelievable so you can be the serial winner that you are?
Well, I think probably the first 5 years would be coupled into two things. One was certainly developing the team and getting the right players, and that helped me grow as well, because I needed to figure out what it is exactly, the type of player that I wanted in order to be successful. So that helped me to grow a great deal. I was more of a skills guy before I started coaching the Martlets. And the other area that I wanted to develop was from the tech-tac point of view, in those first number of years, to get better at the technical and tactical part of the game. And so what I did is I spent a unbelievable amount of time doing research, and some of the research involved watching, the research involved talking with other players. Mike, I always like the story of you, when you started coaching, you come back from England and you do the maybe I'm stealing your, but I use this story a lot, and going to Red Deer College and getting the job and not really knowing what the hell was going on, and spent the rest of the summer, going to hockey practices and writing down drills madly and all that. Well, I do the same thing. I went to hockey practices. I watched. I could have been a pee-wee practice, could have been a Habs practice, whatever it is. I went and watched. I wanted to get better. So certainly in those 5 years and probably longer, those were areas that I wanted to get a whole lot better. And not a whole lot has changed from that point of view. Is that I love to talk hockey. I spent a lot of time reading and moving forward. There definitely was a segment where, we won our first national champions 2008. So, that was 8 or 9 years since I started coaching. So there was a lot of growth and development over the course of that time to get the program to where it is what we wanted to do. So long-winded answer, but.
No, good answer. Appreciate it. Leadership culture, we talked obviously quite a bit about it. You talked about a hierarchy and then not having one, but then you also talked about having a core group of seniors or veteran players and their impact on the young people, including recruiting. So lay out for me the growth from a first-year player to a second-year player to a third-year player to a core player, and what their expectation you have of them to make sure they're doing it the McGill way.
Yeah.
Not Peter Smith way, the McGill way.
Yeah, so that's a good one. I think, all of the expectation for our team, so I have 25 players on our team usually, and this past year was no different. 5 first-year players. And so we spent a lot of time with the first 5-year players and talking about leadership and leadership development. And so what a lot of them want to know is, well, I'm a first-year player. What can I do from a leadership standpoint? And we always tell them the same thing is, a big part of leadership is being a great role model. Well, even in your first year, you have the chance to be a great role model. You can work hard and buy in, and you don't have to be the one who stands up in the team room and makes an impassioned speech. And, it's less about what you say and more about what you do. And they can do a lot in terms of their development. And what helps their development is our veteran players. Our veteran players can, when they see a little bit of slippage, and we try to make sure there's no slippage on our team. And it's not just the coaches who take care of the slippage. It's other players, and not just, I shouldn't say veteran players, it's other players on the team. So a first-year player can mention to another first-year player, for example, hold them accountable. But real important, in a gentle kind of way, mention to them what they could do a little bit better, and then provide that example to them. At the end of the year, we have our exit meetings, as every team does. And at the end of the year, and the end of our year this year was, obviously, as you all know, was not pleasant. We had to limp home for a national championship without even playing because of COVID. It was devastating for our graduating players. We do the exit interviews, and we have a competitive group. They want to win. I think we were real poised to do well at national championship this year. And they all say that. They express a disappointment. But what they talk about once that disappointment is expressed is they talk about the culture on the team. And I think when you get to that stage where they're not just harping on their ice time, or they're not harping on that they didn't power on the power play, or they're not harping on the fact that we didn't win the national championship or didn't have that opportunity, but what they talk about is the culture, the leadership, the development on the team. Then I think that that you got something. I asked the players, so how was it holding everybody accountable? You know what, Peter? Honestly, didn't really have to hold people accountable that much this year. Everybody held themselves accountable. So there were maybe 2 or 3 times where I had to remind people a couple of things, but it didn't happen a whole lot. When you get to that stage, you got something good going.
Dave, do I got time for one more?
Yep. For sure.
So you talked about your recruiting process and how hard you worked at it to get the right people.
Yeah.
What onus goes to you as you're recruiting an 18-year-old player, and they come in and you've met their family and you've met them, and everything's not perfect, but they're there. What part is on you to make sure they come out the 22-year-old that McGill hockey will be proud of, that they'll be proud of, more importantly? What part's on you versus just, we can't take them, things aren't right?
I mean, I think, so we recruited, recruiting for 2021, I think we're probably recruiting 5 or 6 players. We've probably had 50 visits over the course of the year in terms of determining who those 5 or 6 players are going to be for 2021. I think one of the things that we look at very carefully is background. I mean, we look at references to see where they fit in. The interview itself is important. How the player conducts themselves is important. We give them a chance to get on the ice. That's important. Obviously, their skill level is important as well. But then beyond that, and the drop-off point at McGill, and I didn't mention this, but drop-off point at McGill is their academics, is, whether they've got the mark to get in. And right away, that narrows the pool a great deal. So when they do get in and when they come, and what we can, and the thing for me, Mike, is that I don't make any promises. And what I want, and probably the number one thing after their skill and their ability and attitude, the number one thing that we want at McGill is we want players who want to come. And that to me makes a huge difference. I'm not a salesman. I don't twist anybody's arm. I don't make any promises of ice time or power play or any of that sort of stuff. I can promise them that they're going to get opportunity, that they're going to get opportunity to get a great education. They're going to get opportunity to develop as a hockey player, as a teammate, as a person, as a leader. So we can give them those opportunities, and I will make those promises, but there's nothing beyond that. And when the player leaves our office after the interview, I'll say exactly that to them. that we're not going to send them flowers. We're not going to text them and email them every single day. We can tell them how much we want them to come, but the important thing for us is that they want to come. Consequently, what we end up with is a whole room of players who want to be there, that they're not there because Peter's made promises to them. They're there because they want to be there. They want to they want to get a McGill education, and they want to be part of the Martlet hockey program. And that, to me, is essential, that there's a compelling commitment. There's a compelling purpose to what it is that they want to do. And that makes all the difference in the world. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, I think you really did. And I think it's outstanding. Obviously, the culture you've set up there allows people to grow and get better. And when you talked about the eternal accountability that you have within your room, that you've grown over time, obviously, that's why you win. In the end, when you go for dinner at someone's family's house, you sit down and you see the worship they have for their mother, you see how they interact, you see the eternal accountability that they love on the great teams. That's what you have. And you've expressed that very well here today. Are we opening up to questions, or did we run out of time here?
Yeah, we'll open up to a couple questions here. So we got one coming in from Marc-Andre Dorion. He's a McGill alumni playing pro hockey in Europe. And this question goes for both of you guys. So we talk about culture, and you talk about developing it over in university, and you have players there for 4 to 5 years, and it's good to build that chemistry, and they move on, and people can move up through those leadership roles. And he finds it's different in pro hockey, where players have a lot of different interests. They have families. There's a lot of money involved. And just talk about, maybe the difference between the two and finding that chemistry in pro hockey as well.
You go with that, Mike.
Okay, so I've coached every level. So I've coached college 2 different times. I've coached junior. I've coached the American League. I've coached in the National Hockey League. And the big thing for me in answering this question is just because you got different lives away from the rink and you're busy with your family doesn't mean you can't be a really good teammate and have a really good culture. And I think the culture is so important at every level. But when you have a good leadership group, when you have people who care about one another, when you have people that are ultra competitive and they're setting the standard for a young kid, that to me is how you have success. When someone walks in the door and they watch Nick Lidstrom work out, they watch Nick Lidstrom practice, they watch him tape his stick, they get better. When they see Henrik Zetterberg in big moments perform, when you watch how hard Sidney Crosby works, when you watch how hard he looks for new ways to get better, to me, those are things you need. So having that culture and having the right people to lead that culture are so important. Go ahead, Peter.
All right. You know what? Culture is culture. And I think every team is different. And I get asked this question a lot. Would you coach a guy's team the same way you coach a women's team? And no, I wouldn't, because every team is different. If I coached another women's team, it would be different. If I coached a Pee-wee team, it would be different. If I coached a pro team, it would be different. But the values wouldn't change. The importance of culture and developing that culture wouldn't change. There would be subtle things that would change, but I would still hold true to my values. And I think that's exactly what Mike is saying, is that culture is culture. Having a strong culture is an advantage. And no matter what level you're coaching at or working at, having that culture and putting the time into developing that culture is paramount.
And if you don't have it in the end, you're not going to win.
No.
The other thing about the teams with great culture that win, you play the last game in pro hockey, you're never going to be together again. The guys don't want to take their equipment off. They don't want to leave. They want to be together. They've created a family culture where everyone can be important. Everyone's accountable. Everyone's committed and all in. And in the end, those are the pictures that go on your wall, because the ones that you didn't create that in, they didn't win.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we'll try to get to a couple more questions here. This one's coming in from Pat the Little Hood. He says, would you say team building should go before team bonding, or happen very early in the season to ensure proper development of the culture?
Peter, that's you.
Yeah, well, I think they're both important, and I think they're both important to come early in the year. Like, I think it's great. I just think that there's a distinction between the building, the bonding. I think, kind of our approach is that there's that team building that goes on. And once you kind of get to that, and the first year players have a bit more of an insight on what's going on, then it's important. I don't even know what I should be saying this, but I think it's important to get to the bonding part of it as well. And at the beginning of the year, at increments over the course of the year, I think it's important to have both. I really do. I don't know whether Martin Raymond is on the call, but I remember him telling me a few years ago that he said to me, Pete, we should have done more team building at the beginning of the year. And, so at every level, particularly at the beginning of the year, because every team, whether it's pro or amateur or university or whatever it is, you have new players coming in, and getting those players integrated into the culture of the team, particularly by the more senior players on the team, can make a huge difference. And you want to get going on it right away.
I just like to take that to another step. Sometimes in pro, you change a ton of players at one time. It takes those guys some time to get comfortable with each other, to make each other accountable, to have a good room, because they don't know each other as good. But that's so important. But I think the other thing we don't want to get confused with, and I've been to every kind of professional thing you can think of, from ropes courses to camp and to doing all these different team building. Team building to me, when you pay the price, 250-pound D-man's coming down the wall to run you over and you get it out, that's team building. When you lay down in the last second to block a shot, that's team building. When you get into the room, you made each other a bit better, you made each other accountable, and people love you for doing it. Sometimes we get confused with what team building actually is.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think that kind of answers one of the other questions. We had a question from Ryan Essex asking what are his favorite team building activities, and then ones he found to be most impactful. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add onto that point.
I can tell you, we've done, sorry, Peter, we've done an absolute ton of it, from curling with gold medal skips to canoe racing to camping to ropes courses to all this. What I've found each and every year, Peter, and I think it's important because you've done a ton of this, is that often the group of players you have determines the success of the team building event. It isn't the event, it's the people. And that culture that Peter's obviously been able to build at McGill, that goes now year to year. You have to try to keep that at the junior level, at the pro level as well. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I mean, we've had some wacky kind of activities that I'm just looking at and going, oh my God, like how is this going to work? But they make it work. They have fun. They laugh. They giggle. And as I said, one of the cornerstones for us in our program is that it's competitive. The more competitive it is, the better off it is, the more they get out of it. And then the other part of that is that I think the debrief is important, and the debrief by the players. So what do we get out of this? What do we learn? What are you thinking? What are you seeing? I think that it has to be, or in my opinion, it needs to be meaningful. And if you just do an activity and kind of let it go, then you might be missing the boat on that. So getting a debrief and making it meaningful is huge.
That's great, guys. And I'm just going to jump in here, and in order to keep things moving, I'm going to just bring this session to a close. And I'd like to thank Peter and Mike. Peter, outstanding job on the presentation. There's so many good points that we can tease out of there for not just people in hockey, but across sport and other domains. And we had a couple questions that we didn't get to. I'll touch base with you guys so I can get your email addresses, and we'll address those with the presenters after. And then also a reminder that Mike will be back on for a discussion at the end of Jamie's presentation. So up next, I'll introduce our next speaker. Up next, we have Jamie Kompon, the associate coach of the Winnipeg Jets. So Jamie was the captain of the McGill hockey team while he earned a degree in physical education. He's currently in his 23rd year coaching in the NHL, and his journey has included stints with the St. Louis Blues, Los Angeles Kings, Chicago Blackhawks, and most recently Winnipeg Jets, in addition to 2 years as the head coach and GM of the Portland Winterhawks. In 2013, Jamie became the first NHL coach in 78 years to win back-to-back Stanley Cup titles with different teams, Los Angeles and Chicago. Jamie is incredibly thorough and has an outstanding attention to detail, and you'll see that in his presentation today. His tireless work behind the scenes is no doubt contributing to the success of those Stanley Cup winning teams.
Well, thank you very much for the very nice introduction, Dave. I really appreciate you having me on here. I'm going to speak about commonalities of championship teams. Now, Dave asked me to speak about this, and we had long discussions about what it is and what are some of the commonalities that I found winning back-to-back championships. And now I've got to preface this by saying I've been very fortunate to be associated, be involved with two great organizations in Los Angeles and Chicago, but also on my journey with St. Louis and now Winnipeg. And I was very fortunate to be surrounded by good management, good staff, great staff. So I'm only going to speak about my two championships here and how it relates. So just to get started here, this is the outline that I hope to accomplish for everyone here. I'm going to talk about our rosters of both teams, both LA and Chicago, the clear identity of each team, the mentorship role, and I'll only speak about one player here, but there are many more I can talk about. But one player was instrumental in both the mentorship for Los Angeles, and we coached in Chicago at the same time. Leaders' practice habits, the coaches' communication, and from two different respects, from Joel Quenneville to Daryl Sutter, and then instilling that belief and confidence. So just to start with, I'll talk about our roster here in LA. So as you can see, the guys that are highlighted, the players that are highlighted have won Stanley Cup. So we had 4 previous Stanley Cup winners: Justin Williams, Colin Fraser, Dustin Penner, and Rob Scuderi. So with that, we had a very young roster, and with Dean's whole premise was develop, and draft well, and develop them. And then in turn, and I'll touch on this a little later, in turn, make every player an asset. So there's going to be a time where those players, those assets, for lack of a better term, are going to bring you or reap you the rewards that you need when you need to fit that next player in, or that missing piece that you need. So as you can see, we had 4 players that won Stanley Cups. And then with Chicago, who had won previously, so I'm coming into a different situation. They had won in 2010, and they stumbled in the first 2 rounds. They fell to Vancouver in 7 games after they won in 11. And then in 12, they lost in the first round to Phoenix. At the time, they were called Phoenix, Arizona, in a 6-game first round, which 5 of the games went into overtime. So they couldn't get back over that hump. But 9 players, with the exclusion of Corey Crawford, he was on the taxi squad, if you would say. But those 9 players had significant roles in winning that cup in 2010. So some of the similarities here. Some of the similarities of the roster. So our average age in Los Angeles was 25.6. The average age was a little older when we won in Chicago, 26.9. So players drafted and developed. We had 14 players that we drafted and developed, but we also had 3 or 4 other players that we had to draft, develop, and trade in order to gain the right pieces for our fit. And in Chicago, there were 13 players that were drafted and developed. And, you know, that when you get a Patrick Kane and a Jonathan Toews, it's easy to build around those players that are those elite players. Players that won the Stanley Cup, like I mentioned, there were 4, and there were 9 with Chicago because they had won in 2010. And also the players that lost in the finals. And I think this is a critical piece. We had 5 players on our roster that had lost in those finals. So they knew what it took to get there, the commitment, the sacrifice. They understood what it took, and to watch another team hoist the Stanley Cup. And in Chicago, there was 1. So, you know, 9 on one side that had those finals experience, and 10 on the other side. Now we go from the rosters to our clear identity. So when I say this, when Dean Lombardi took over, I was very fortunate to be there for 6 years in Los Angeles. We started off, I made it through, went through 3 head coaches, Mark Crawford, Terry Murray, and then Daryl Sutter. So we started, when Dean took over this team, we started at the ground floor, and it took time to build our identity. Dean was very much the master plan. And when I sit back after, after a year, after 2 years, I was wondering where he was going with this. And the master plan was all about to draft and develop to build our team. And when you say that, well, how do you do that? Well, we were, for lack of a better term, we weren't a very good hockey team in LA in my first 2 years. So we began by signing these bridge players to play with our youth. So these bridge players were good players. They might have been at the end of their the line per se, but they were good mentors for our young players. And those bridge players would turn into assets. So then at the deadline, these bridge players that have maybe had Stanley Cup experience, that have maybe been able to mentor these young players, they become an asset for us. And therefore we acquired draft picks. We didn't necessarily want players in return. We wanted draft picks so that we can draft and develop our own players, so we can have a signature on our players, so we can have that signature. And remember, this was a real process here. So it took 6 years to get to where we wanted to get to. And every year you were wondering, and as coaches, you're in the win now business. But Dean was very patient with us. He told us the whole process. He wanted us, our input on what we wanted, what we were doing. And Dean was very big on, like I mentioned earlier, treat every player that comes into our organization, whether it's a signee from a free agent signee, whether it's a 7th round pick, whether it's a 9th round pick. Back then there were 9 rounds. So whatever the pick was, you got to treat him like everybody else and make him the best he can be, and develop him to become an NHL player. And if he falls short, well, we know where we took him to the limit that we could, and now maybe it's time to trade him for an asset, whether it's a 5th round pick, whether it's a 6th round pick, whether we can package him in with another deal. That was really important. And then this also involves the trading of picks to acquire the right players. So when you get to that stage, and Dean was very big, he said it's going to take time and we have to make the playoffs. That's the goal, is just to make the playoffs, to gain that experience. And when you think of Mike Babcock's team in Detroit, when you think of when I was in St. Louis, we were perennial playoff teams. It was not a matter of making the playoffs. It's what kind of noise were you going to create in the playoffs, and what was going to happen. That was you were just playing the regular season and build for the playoffs. Whereas we were building to get in the playoffs, to gain that experience and then see where it goes from there. So that was our big goal. So our identity, when Daryl Daryl was really good about it, because he made sure we wanted to be a fast team, we wanted to be a physical team, and we wanted to be a smart team. And Daryl, that's what Dean wanted to build, but we tried to reinforce it. But when Daryl came in at Christmas time, he put that on the board. He made sure that every meeting had that in it: smart, fast, physical. He wanted those elements to the forefront to make sure that we understood that's who we are, and bring those elements out in our game. Every game, every shift, we wanted to make sure we were smart, fast, and physical. Now, when I went to Chicago, I had coached with Joel previously in St. Louis, and I owe Joel and Mike Kitchen a lot to be where I am today. And the one clear identity was Joel was very much, he never talked about offense. He talked about being great defenders. All he wanted to do was make sure we were great defenders. We were taking care of the puck, making sure we were making the right decisions when we had the puck, and we were in the right position when we didn't have the puck. We were defending the right way. We were doing what we needed to do in order to get that puck back, so we can play with speed and we can dictate the game with our possession game. And that identity was very clear, because he gave a lot of responsibility to the players. Having Jonathan Toews, having Patrick Kane, having Marian Hossa, having these players that are very gifted offensively and creative offensively, he didn't want to pigeonhole them. He wanted to allow them to do what they did best when they had the puck. So he put the onus on the player with the puck. He made sure they were making the right decisions, and he'd hold them accountable for it also. But he made sure that he wasn't going to tell them you had to have this player here or this player there or do this or do that or shoot when you had to shoot. It was more so the onus was on the players. And we knew that if we were good defenders, we would get the puck back and we would allow our skill to come out. So like I mentioned, they won in 2010. Our whole goal in 13, it was the strike shortened season, was to stay the course and strive to get better each practice, each game, each shift. Build our team game to be playoff ready. That was our habits and details. We wanted to make sure we were going to be ready for the playoffs. We were going to be ready when that playoff, that first round came, and we were going to make sure that we hit it head on. Always looking to improve our roster, and it must fit our needs. And then continue to develop our youth on our roster. We had some young players in Brandon Sod. We had Nick Letty. We had Andrew Shaw. These were young players that played part of the year in the American League, and then they came up to us once the lockout was over. So it was really important to continue to instill good habits with them and work with them on a daily basis. So now I'll talk about the mentorship. The mentorship side of it was, I can talk about a bunch of players, but one player that really sticks out to me is that had a major impact on both organizations was Michael Handzus. When we signed him, he was a 30-year-old free agent. The impact that he had on our young players in LA over his 4-year tenure there was incredible. Terry Murray had known him from Philadelphia. I had coached him as a rookie in St. Louis when we were in St. Louis. Michael Handzus is one of those players he's a better person than a player. He's team first, everything. He may not be the fastest, he may not be the strongest, but you can rely on Michael Handzus, and he's a great person and a great teammate. The effect he had on Anze Kopitar and Wayne Simmons and so on down the roster was incredible. He's a quiet leader who had a huge part on helping our team make the next step. And I'll tell you a story. So the story I'd like to tell you about Michael was his first year. Anze Kopitar was 20 years old. So this is Anze Kopitar's second year in the league. So Kopi, being a young player from Europe, he'd show up, practice, sit on the couch, have a cup of coffee, watch Sports Center, watch whatever was on. Michael was a 30-year-old veteran player, and he felt took it upon himself to mentor these young players. And so he grabbed Kopi one day, and he wasn't grabbing 5 guys. He just grabbed Kopi, knowing Kopi was a young and impressionable player that didn't understand what the North American game was about, what the NHL was about. He had an idea, but he didn't know. And so Michael grabbed him and said, "Come on, Kopi, come with me. We're going to the gym. We're going to get a routine for you every day. Just can't sit on the couch and go out to have coffee and then go out, practice and be at your best. So let's get into a routine." So Michael took him in the gym, worked with him for about 20 minutes or so, prepared him for practice. Next day happens, same thing. There's Kopi on the couch. Come on. So this went on for about 2 or 3 weeks. And, you kind of wander around the room, you go grab coffee, you're building those relationships as a coach. And then finally the one day I see Kopi in the gym and he's going, "Have you seen Handzus? Where's Michael?" So that impact that he had on Anze Kopitar to get him into a routine, to get him mentally prepared for that practice so he can be at his best. So in turn, it transferred over to the game. And they built a very special relationship over the 4 years that Michael was with us. And now I'll skip ahead to when Michael trade deadline acquisition. So now it's a strike shortened season. We're trying to fill a hole here for our second line center. And both Mike Kitchen, Joel Quenville, and including myself, like I mentioned, we all coached Michael as a rookie. We knew the type of person he was and how he would fit into our room. He wasn't going to make waves. He would solidify our second line center where he can play between Patrick Sharp and Patrick Kane. They can do their things on offense, but Michael was the reliable piece. And Michael, he had a gift to get the puck to players at the right time. His veteran presence added to our penalty kill and our faceoffs. And then as a respected leader, it was a critical piece for our success. So another story about Michael in Chicago. We're in the playoffs in the first round against Minnesota. He breaks his wrist. He breaks a bone in his wrist. So he's got a broken wrist. We're wondering what he can do. And Michael never tells anyone, just Go see the doctors. We find out about it. He's got to get his wrist numb before every game. So that means in the small bone in his wrist, he's got to get shot up 21 more times. I believe it happened in game 2. So we played 23 games. So 21 more times he had to get this bone shot up every time. And the players, he'd be blocking shots. Players would be blocking shots. There's no question you're not in pain. You look at what Michael's going through between practice, or he wanted to be on the ice for practice between games and morning skates. He would be out there, but he wasn't shooting or passing, but he'd be out there supporting his teammates. And that showed our players the sacrifice that he made. So they were never going to get anyone help them off the ice, because they understood the kind of pain that Michael was playing through. And so a little story is that at the end of, we won in Boston, came back and scored 2 goals in the last 17 seconds of that game 6. Very memorable for us. And usually when we fly home, I didn't know this, but the captain is usually the guy taking the cup off the plane. But this is how highly they thought of Michael, and only being with us from the trade deadline on, that's how highly they thought of Michael Handzus. It was an incredible moment for Michael, for the organization, for the teammates. They believed in him. It was incredible how much respect they had for him. So now moving forward with our leaders' practice habits. I've been very fortunate, like I mentioned, with some great teams, but also some great leaders. Kopitar, Williams, Stoll, Green, those guys in LA, they were at the front of the line. Anze Kopitar is a 19-year-old. English wasn't his first language, but I'll tell you, he was at the front of every line. He was attention to detail guy. He was at the front of every line, wanted to lead the way, wanted to make sure that everyone was following his lead. In Chicago, Taze, Hossa, Kane, Keith, the list can go on and on. They practiced hard. They wanted to do the drills 100 miles an hour. They wanted to do things right. And by doing things right, everyone else was going to follow. They'd go all out. Teammates would have no choice but to follow, and how hard they went. Top players always competed against top players in practice. It challenged them to be at their best all the time. And so you talk about the culture, and you talk about creating that environment where that compete, that constant chatter, that chirping each other on the ice, and those little competitions, those little battles. So when Daryl took over, he was an old school coach in terms of practice, and it was incredible, because in practice, here we are in Los Angeles, we're doing 5-on-0s, 3-on-0s, 2-on-0s, and our goalies were always challenged. We were challenged to score. We couldn't score. We had one of the best goals against average in the league, leading up to our Stanley Cup run. So I think for 3 years running, we were in the top 3, top 5 in the league in that, but we couldn't score. And so our goalies were challenged. And I remember Billy Ranford looking over on me, can we throw a defender in there? Like, Quicker and Bernier are just getting peppered here every time. But it was incredible, because you'd go down the ice and Jonathan Quick, he was so competitive that there was no way he was going to allow a goal to be scored on him, or a rebound, or another rebound, or another rebound. So we're doing 5-on-0s or 3-on-0s, and everybody's watching Quicker make 2, 3, 4 saves. Whistle blows. They go back the other end. Now Bernier, he's got to respond. He's just not going to let that first shot in. So now Bernier at the other end, he's making 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 saves in a row. So now everyone's chirping each other, and the energy in practice just went higher and higher and higher. When they finally did score, there was a huge celebration, and it just created that bond with the players. But it showed how hard it was to score on our goalies, and the belief that our team had. Maybe that helped us, or maybe that hurt us, because we weren't able to score because we had 2 world-class goalies. But then going to Chicago, and it was all about our defending skills. So anytime Kaner went, Nick Hjalmarsson, who is a great defender, who is one of the top premier, most underrated defenders in the NHL, and Johnny Oduya always stepped out. We got to be against them. Their defending skills, their stick skills, and the chirping that would go on back and forth, and in any drills that they did, anytime it was a 3-on-2 or a 5-on-5 drill, it was always the best against the best, because that brought out that competition. They wanted to make sure they were driving each other and competing in such a way that it would bring the best out in them. And and the camaraderie again, the chirping, the one-liners, the celebrations. It just brought everyone together. There was an energy on the ice like no one's ever seen. It was great. It was a great feeling. And as coaches, it was awesome because we just saw it and continued. We let the whistle go. All of a sudden we blow the whistle and they'd be yelling at us, "We want another try. We want another try. One more time. And it was the energy that it provided was incredible. So moving on, now the coaches' communication, very unique for each. So we're talking about Joel Quenneville, who had won, and Daryl Sutter, who had been to the finals twice, once as an associate coach with Mike Keenan in Chicago, losing to Pittsburgh, and then again in Game 7, losing to Tampa when he was the head coach of Calgary. So Joel was very much a player's coach. He spoke to the players individually about their game, his expectations of their game. He allowed the leaders to take control of the room and made sure the coach's message was always being reinforced by the leaders. He was very much allowed the room to be the players' sanctuary and made sure that the players took care of it. But in saying that, they had also won. So you've seen that relationship kind of foster. He knew the clientele, or he knew the players within the room. So he knew he could trust the room. They've been there before. They've taken care of it before. So very much knowing your team is very, very critical in that situation. And Daryl, well, when Daryl came in, he was trying to figure out our players. He was demanding, and he wanted perfection. He pushed the players out of their comfort zone, which was really, the players, they would just, at times they never expected that. And Daryl would start barking. He expected more from them. For Daryl, okay was not okay. He wanted them to push outside the comfort zone. So when it came time, they were outside. They were comfortable being uncomfortable. He wanted to push them to that next level. He knew there was another level there for them. So he was very demanding on the players. And the one other thing that was really unique is that Daryl wanted to make sure before games that the coaches were in the dressing room with the players before the meeting. He wanted our presence in there to make sure we were talking to individuals and talking to players to keep them on task, or maybe even relaxing them in some situation. But he wanted us around the room so that we got we had that interaction with the players, which I found, I've never done that before, but there were some players that were uptight that we got a chance to talk to them about different things and take their mind off that excitement about them going out on the ice. And it was good to take their nerves away from it. And then to other guys, it was to wind them up and to get them focused, to make sure they were focused and ready to go. So it was very unique in both situations. And when I say this, so Joel it was always individual video. So when we talked on for the communication, Joel was talking to the team. He spoke to the team. He talked to the team. He showed them on the board. Very little video was done during our playoff run. I think maybe we showed 2 clips. And Daryl was very much the other way, where every night before the game, we stayed in hotels, in the hotel when we were at home. So we'd have a 7 o'clock at night, and I was responsible for doing the video and preparing our team to make sure that we were ready to go for the next day. So we had clear minds. The next day, there'd be no meetings. It was just our team meeting that night. And Daryl was very much, again, demanding and wanting perfection. And he wanted to make sure everyone, I'll never forget, because I'm doing the video and all of a sudden he yells at me, "Jamie, that's not right." I'm like, whoa. And everyone took notice. And that was Daryl's way to make sure that everyone was paying attention. He'd bark at me and he'd bark at the coaches on the ice to make sure that we were in tune, to keep the players in tune, which I found was very unique, but it worked. The players were at the edge of their seat, making sure that they were listening, and if they were going to be quizzed at any time, because he'd quiz me and then I'd come up with the answer. So now the players had to be on point because they might be quizzed. And where Joel, there was one instance in the finals, and I'll never forget this. Mike Kitchen and I brought it to him and said, "Hey, Joel, we got to show a couple clips here about Boston was notorious for making rink-wide passes. They would just fire the puck rink-wide. We saw this in the pre-scout. We spoke about it, but we never really spoke about it in a group setting. We talked about it on the bench and everything. So we adjusted our forecheck a little bit, and our forecheck in the neutral zone, we just put our F3 a little wider. And lo and behold, he talked to the team before the game about that. I believe it was in game two or game 3. And he spoke to the team about that. And sure enough, we stayed a little wider. And it's just about knowing your team. Rink wide pass, there's Patrick Sharp in the slot, picks off the pass, takes a shot. Everybody on the bench goes, oh, it does work. So there was that belief in what we were doing was right. This is the way we were going to do it, and this is the way we were going to approach it. So now instilling that belief and confidence. And how do we handle the adversity? Well, our adversity was year-long in LA. We scratched, nailed, tooth nailed, clawed. We got our way into the playoffs in the last week of the season. We needed points in the last week of the season to get into the playoffs, and we just wanted to give ourselves the best chance to get in those playoffs. And that's all we wanted to do. Whereas in Chicago, we started off the season like a house on fire. I believe the record was 21-0-3 to start the season. We lost our 25th game in Colorado, and it was about time because that was weighing on us. But to start the season like that, it was a little different animal. But creating that environment, and like I spoke about, those practices, how exciting and how fun they were, and how we instilled that belief and that camaraderie and that believing in one another, and then finding different ways to win and having different players step up at different times. And another story that I'll share with you was in LA. We're playing the first game of the finals in their building in Jersey, and it's 10 minutes into the game. We throw Colin Fraser, Brad Richardson, and Jordan Nolan out, and they throw Zajac, Parise, Zubris out. So, okay, our fourth line's going against their top players, no problem. We had that trust. Daryl had that trust. It wasn't necessarily a matchup for him. He wanted to instill that trust, and it was a process to build that trust. But it was unbelievable because sure enough, they created a turnover. Jordan Nolan, I'll vividly remember it, in the trapezoid, right behind the net, pass out to Colin Fraser, 1-0, good guys. It was like that, and the energy that it provided, our fourth line just scored on their first line, their top line, and that was a huge boost. So that confidence that everyone was contributing. There was no passengers. Everyone stepped up, and they understood they were a part of it, and that's that trusting the process of building our game shift by shift, where less is more. And then that idea of learning to park a win or a loss, preparing for the next day was huge for us. In LA, we always talk about, the players always talk about, enjoy it until midnight. At midnight, we cut it and we move on. We move on. Win or loss, park it, and our focus and being ready, and then facing that adversity. Taking nothing for granted, to continue to reinforce our team game, our identity through video and through individual video with our players, continuing to work with our young players, continuing to make them better, and getting our practice habits right, making sure okay wasn't okay in LA, and making sure our defending skills were right when we were in between series and preparing for our next game. And then on the ice, individual skills, reinforcing those habits and details, building confidence within our group. And I think that was really, really critical. And, as a coach, this is the most gratifying thing. And I talked to one of my colleagues, and they said, he stole a quote from director Todd Phillips. He's a big movie buff. And he said, Todd Phillips said to him, he goes, all preparation disappears into the performance. And he read that, and he told me about that. And isn't that so true? Because these players know what they endured. And as a coach, we know what they endured. Like I just heard Mike Babcock talking about, that blocking that shot in the last minute, getting that team's respect, all those practices, all those bus trips, all those flights back, all those heavy practices, those heartbreaking losses. But the culmination of this is to win. The excitement of these players, that's what I'll always remember. the excitement that they did this together. We helped foster this to build this. No matter at what level, we did it. We did it together. And that's the most gratifying thing as a coach. And I just want to say thank you for your support on this great day.
That's fantastic presentation, Jamie. Thank you for that. So now we're going to open it back up. We'll bring Mike back on here for some discussion. And then just a reminder, Mike and Jamie will have a little discussion back and forth about that topic, and then we'll open it up to some questions. So just send me your questions privately on the chat.
Can you hear me now?
I got you.
Comper, unbelievable job. Good to see you, kid.
Yeah.
You know, guys, when Comper came to McGill, I think it was in my last year. I think we've known each other since '85, if I'm not mistaken. That'd be dating us a little bit there. But good to see you, and great job in the presentation. And for anybody listening today, it's not too hard to figure out why Comper has so much success, because his detail and his passion are second to none. He loves the game, and he's been a lifelong learner and just keeps getting better. I was excited to hear you talk. Obviously, big fan of both the coaches you work with, know the stories real well. So it was fun to hear you walk down memory lane a little bit there. Smart, fast, physical, defenders, speed, possession. What stood out to me right away when you talked about it, knowing both guys in LA, you didn't give up any goals against. In Chicago, you defended like nobody. When you think about championship teams and the ability to defend so you can get the puck back so you can have it all the time, can you explain to everybody just how important this is?
Well, I think it's a critical piece. You know, I thank you very much first, Babs. It's always great to see you and talk with you, but thanks for the kind words. The biggest thing with us is when Terry Murray took over, we cut our goals against average down by 80. 80, that's a big number. For my first 2 years, we cut our goals against average down by 80. And that's a huge number. And you can say, yeah, Jonathan Quick, Jonathan Bernier. No, we didn't have those goalies. Those guys weren't our number one guys. Those guys weren't, they were part pieces. It was about buying in. It's about playing on the other side of the puck. Terry Murray is as much a part of this, that championship team in 2012 as Darryl was. It was, Darryl pushed the buttons to get it going, but Terry Murray had a huge hand in making sure our defensive details were right. And that goes right from us as coaches to make sure our attention to detail, where we needed to be. And he just started it. He just came out. This is what we're doing in training camp. We're putting 5 dots on the ice. This is where we need you to be. So we put 5 dots and we packed the 5 dots. And I'll tell you something, our practice rink guys weren't too happy, but those black dots were on there for, I bet you, 6 months afterwards. And our players never forgot about where to come back to. And it was packed right into the hash mark area. And we made sure we were going to defend, and we were going to defend the right way. We had great sticks. Everything was about our sticks and our body position. We didn't want to give up the back of the net. It was everything about how well we defended without the puck. And that started from our forecheck to having a good F3. And maybe it hurt our offense, but we didn't care. 80 goals is a huge number, and we got into the top 10 that first year. And that was a critical piece for us catapulting the other way. And when I say this, when you think of Joel Quenneville and the teams he's coached, everybody thinks of offense. And that's the first thing that comes to your mind. Well, Joel Quenneville's offense. It's all offense. And Babs, I know you worked with him at the World Cup, and I think you can attest to this. It was all about defending. I don't ever remember Joel coming into a meeting or ever remember Joel talking about, we have to create offense tonight, or we have to create this tonight. It was all about how we are going to defend, how we were going to defend that team, how we were going to take care of the puck. And defending is also what you do with the puck, where you place the puck, what those turnovers in the neutral zone. He instilled confidence in our players to allow them to play the game that they wanted to play. And in turn, the players, the payoff was, you have to play the right way without the puck, but with the puck, we'll give you carte blanche to an extent. We're not talking about trying to deke 5 guys out in the neutral zone, although we've seen Patrick Kane do that. But that was, there were rules for Patrick Kane, and then there were rules for Brandon Bollig. So, you know, everyone bought into that. And I think that was a critical piece, because Joel instilled that confidence in our players, but our players knew how to play without the puck. And we weren't a physical team. But I will tell you, we had some of the best sticks. I think Mike can attest to that. We had some of the best sticks in the league, and it was great to see.
Compro, I'll just tell you a quick little story about Joel. He comes to the World Cup. We have obviously real good coaching staff, and he says, "Bever, my job, I want to be the stick cop, and I want to change the D." So his whole focus was watching anybody stick in the wrong spot and telling everybody, Kopitar, Taves. So you got two of the best two-way centers, can play head-to-head against anybody in all situations, to score, to defend. Tell me how important that is for championship teams.
Well, Kopitar, I can tell you right now that Michael Hanses had a big impact on that. And he watched Michael play the game. And again, for people that don't know Michael, he was just a solid two-way player, maybe a point of game player early in his career. But Kopi learned about his stick, about how important. In Europe, face-offs aren't important. You know, they don't put a focal point on it. And Kopi put his stick down like you'd see in the old hockey cards and the old watching the old games on TSN and that right now. They just put their stick down and have their hands at the end of their stick. And if you want it, you want it. If not, you didn't. And that was kind of Kopi's mindset. And over the course of his career, you can see him. He's one of the top face-off men every year. And that's a huge piece, because then you start with possession. You're not chasing the game. And Kopitar is, as good as he is offensively, he's better defensively. He is just unbelievable defensively in terms of his reads and where he needs to be, and using his size to his ability, to his advantage, I should say. And what can I say about Jonathan Toews? Just the ultimate competitor. And a little story about Jonathan was in that playoffs, he wasn't producing the way he wanted to produce. He felt like he was letting the team down, and it was something eye-opening for me, because he always wanted more. He wanted to prove that he can put points up, but also be a great defender. And he took a lot of pride in playing without the puck, but he also wanted to contribute to the team on offense. So I believe it was after, or it was during the LA series. So round 3 of the LA series. And now I had to pull him aside because I thought he was going to hang himself. And I just said, you got to look at it, Jonathan. We played Minnesota. So Minnesota you're going against head-to-head with Saku Koivu, who's one of the best two-way players. That's your job, Saku Koivu. You're playing against Suter, and whoever his partner is that night, he's going to be on you like a glove. You got 5 guys that are defending you, but you're also defending them. So what were you that series? So I had the numbers, and I talked to him about it. I said, yeah, guess what? You were +5, and you contributed 2 assists and a goal. That's great. Okay, you go against your team in Detroit, Babs. Very memorable series, but you go against that monster, and you're playing Datsuk and Zetterberg against Toews. So Datsuk and Zetterberg, and you come out of that a plus player. Like, seriously, you got Nick Lidstrom every time you're on the ice, Nick's on the ice. Like, you have to take a step back and have these players take a step back to realize their contributions. And then I said, you got Kopitar. So Kopitar is out every time you're out, and then Doughty's out there. So you're getting blanketed, and whether it's Dustin Brown or Justin Williams, you've got someone, Mike Richards, you got someone in your back pocket, and you're a plus player here. So the impact you're having on our team, you're allowing everybody else to do their job too. And it just took him to hear that, to go, okay, I am on the right path. And it was just a moment where he just wanted to win so badly, and his competitive instincts were so great that he wanted to contribute and do everything at any cost, that he just needed to take a step back and be reminded on how much he was contributing.
Good job, Comper. I want one more from you, if you don't mind. Everyone sees you now. You're the associate coach of the Winnipeg Jets. You're a 2-time Stanley Cup champion. But I remember the days, the video stuff in St. Louis, the strength coach stuff. Tell the guys about crawling your way to where you are, and how you got to where you are, and how much fun you've had doing it.
Well, it's been a long road, and I'll tell you, I loved every second, and this isn't even a job for me, Babs. For me, it's a passion. I love it. I jump out of bed. I don't know how many people can say they jump out of bed every morning excited about going to work, but I'm excited about learning about who I work with. And that goes back to when I was even doing video. When I even started, I just love the opportunity, and The one thing that when I did start, I started at McGill. I was in Montreal. I coached at Loyola High School where I got my start. Went to McGill, coached with Jean Pronovo and Martin Raymond. After 5 years of teaching and coaching there, I decided I had the coaching bug. I wanted to give this an opportunity. I got on as a volunteer assistant in Baltimore in the American League. I worked with Mo Mantha and Mike Gibbons, and they were great to me. I did anything and everything, whatever I can do to get ahead and learn. And that was a big thing, is just always, there was no task that was never undoable. I was going to get it done for them. I never said no. And it's the relationships you make along the way. And you know what? The relationships that I've made throughout hockey, and you never burn a bridge, and no matter what, it's been incredible, because a person that I did hockey schools all my life, and a person that I was working a hockey school with that summer said to me, he goes, "Hey, Joel Quenneville just took the job in St. Louis. I just recommended you for the video job." And I'm like, I don't know anything about video. My VCR is basically flashing noon constantly. I don't know how to program it. I don't know what I'm doing. He goes, "Don't worry, just your hockey mind, that's what he'll appreciate." So I went and I interviewed with Joel, and I'm nervous. And long story short, he hires me, and he brings me into this video room, and it's literally like a cockpit. I honestly, there were TVs and monitors and this and that, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, he goes, "Don't worry, Jamie, you got 3 weeks to learn." And I said to him, I go, I don't know how to program my video, my VCR. He goes, "Well, hey, there's resources. We can get them for you, and you'll be fine." And that's how I started. And it was an incredible journey. And Joel and I have had this relationship, and this great relationship. And I was very fortunate to work with him and Mike Kitchen. And then getting the opportunity to go back after I left LA, after we won in 12, and for them to believe that much in me, to hire me back in Chicago, was huge. And then it was a chance for me to bring everything back to them, to show them what I've learned, to kind of help them say, "Hey, look, this is what you've taught me. This is where I've come." So it was time for the student to show the teacher what he had learned along the way. And I'm very fortunate of that. And Babs, I want to say, the relationships that you have, and people don't know this, but when I left Chicago after my second year to take an opportunity in Portland. I was there for 2 years. I got fired. I never had an opportunity. I was at the draft in Buffalo, and you know where I'm going with this, Babs, but it was World Cup time. Joel and you were talking World Cup on the draft floor in Buffalo, and Joel and Kitch were such good people. They invited me to the draft, hang out with them, stay with them, just to reconnect with them. They knew what I was going through, and I never had any opportunity. I never had a job, and there was nothing going on. And sure enough, Paul Maurice walks over to Joel and Babs and said, "So you coming up with a game plan to kick our ass?" Because he was coaching with the Team Europe at the World Cup. And one thing led to another. They started talking, and they asked, I think it was you that asked, Babs, had you found an assistant coach? Because he was in the market for an assistant coach. And at the same time, both you and Joel said my name, and I thank you for that, because that opportunity that night, I met Paul for the first time. I had met him and just briefly chatted with him, but I had met him, and that night, and he asked me 2 questions. He said, you have time tomorrow? You can answer those 2 questions and we can meet. And the next day we met for about 3 hours, and the rest is history. I'm 4 years here in Winnipeg, and it's those relationships and those bonds that you have. And I want to thank Mike for presenting my name to Paul. And I'm excited about where I'm at in Winnipeg, and where we're at as a team also.
Well, real good job here, Comper. We're going to open her up, Dave.
Yep. So we'll open up, just building off that last question from Mike. We had a couple questions. I'm going to combine them here. One is for both of you guys. What challenges did you face early on in your career? And then the second part of that, just building off that, is all 3 speakers today, including Peter, you guys are all lifelong learners. So what are you doing on a daily basis to continue that lifelong learning?
Comper, I'll go first here on this one. You know, the first one is kind of like Comper there. When you're in the video room and you're looking around, you don't have a clue. When I got hired, I'd signed a 3-year deal to go back overseas. When I got hired, I knew zero about coaching hockey. I knew where to put my stick. I knew how to defend as a D-man, but I didn't know anything about coaching hockey. And I just figured out in a hurry that if the guys had fun and we worked hard, we had a chance. And then I did what I call R&D Robin do, is I just took the best coach, Perry Pern, in our league, and I learned everything I could from Perry Pern, stole all the things he did, and went from there. As far as lifelong learning goes, I think just like Comper said, when you get up every morning and you're fired up, like I've never had a job in my life. I've been in hockey my whole life, never had a job, and just met great people after great people after great people. And when you do that, you have a passion to get better. You know you have to get better. What you did yesterday, everybody has already, and you're going to get passed by. So you have to get better. And so putting yourself around the best books, the best people, CEOs. I mean, you can learn from anyone, but I think you have to have that mindset that you want to get better, and you have to keep reinventing yourself. And I really thought as the years went on, that's what the summer came to, is to reinvent yourself and get ready for the next year. Comper?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for me, it was the same thing. Like I had no idea what I was doing. When I took over the Loyola program, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, I know what I'm doing. And then all of a sudden I had no clue. Like I thought I knew, but the one thing that I learned very quickly is that never assume. That's the first thing Joel said to me. He goes, never assume. I go, what do you mean never assume? He goes, never assume they know, because they don't know. They'll put on a front that they do know, but never assume that they know. And that's even the NHL players, because, Mike can attest to this, and any NHL coaches that are on this can know that they think they know, the players know, they don't know. You have to spell it out for them, help them with it. Some elite players, yes, but a lot of players, you have to make sure that they understand, or have them tell you what you're trying to get across to them. But as for me, I love what I do. I think I'm always watching other sports to try and get better. I'm listening to how they talk. I'm listening to their interviews. I'm listening to how they treat their team. The Hard Knocks, I listen to that. I watch that Pro Football Life to see what different coaches have been through. I like watching different interviews. I try and model myself after different people, and that makes me who I am. But ultimately, you've got to hold true to your values and what you believe in. And the first thing, I always want to be a sponge. I want to learn. That's what makes it exciting. I learn from the players every day. When we started this, when I started coaching, it was a little more of a dictatorship. It was what you did. Now it's a partnership. So it's that relationships. I think that's really important to understand. You can't tell them what to do. You've got to show them, talk to them, make sure it's okay with them, and then have 7 answers for them, because they're going to ask you 7 different questions. How this is going to affect me, how this is going to affect my draft status, how this is going to affect my teammates, how is it going to affect me as a person. Like, you've got to have all these answers ready to go, because you know as well as I do, that's what they're on a need to know basis here. Before it was jump and they say how high. But it's all those little details that go into it. And I think that that's really important. And for me, I like watching, like, this pause has been good, because we're in a situation where we're on the outside looking in, depending on what you're looking at in terms of playoff picture, but what can we do better as a team? So it's given me a chance to reflect on things that we need to do better, and things that we don't. And Paul's always bugging me that I should do something else, because you got to get away from the game too and recharge. So that's I have been, which is a good advice, but it's good to recharge too. Peter?
For me, I mean, the guys have said it all, but for me, it's 3 things. It's passion, books, and people. That's how you get better. You got to have the passion for learning. I said I'd retire when I know everything about coaching, and that'll never. I mean, the retirement part will happen, but the knowing everything about coaching will never happen. be 200 years old and still want to learn and get better. So it's passion, and it's books, and it's people. It's the books you read and the people you meet and the people that you talk to. And as Mike said, it doesn't matter who it is. You can learn and figure some things out. And sometimes you learn some things that you don't want to do, and that's an important part of it as well. And but lots of times you learn some good things about what you do want to do. So passion, books, and people for me are what it's all about.
And on that note, I'll share Peter's book list in the chat with everyone as we're going here. So moving on to the next question. This one's coming from Wayne Hallowell. He says, how do you teach talented players to play with creativity within a structure, noting that there's a challenge getting players to respect the structure system without stifling their creativity?
Babs, you want to take this one?
Sure. Wayne, thanks for the question. What I found over the years is this isn't as big a deal as you might think. The best players want to be the best players. They want to be great. They want a partnership with you, like Comper said. Kane's rules are different than someone else's rules. Datsuk's rules are different. Matthew's rules, Marner's rules are different. And because they have a different skill set. In saying that, they don't need every time something goes wrong for you to be reminding them, but what they need is parameters. But in the end, and I think one of the things that Comper said is the best players, the best coaches, what they do is they teach you to take care of the puck so that you're not chasing it all the time. So there's situations that you have to look after it. Other situations, you take them on. But the great players, they have a skill set and a feel. They don't turn the puck over that much anyway because of the fact that they have that skill set to handle those situations. So I just think understanding the parameters for them and having a partnership with you is what it's all about.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Babs. That's, like you look at Patrick Kane, sure, he's got the high-end talent, your Datsuk's and the rules that they have. I thought Joel was really good at that in terms of allowing them a leash. But there was a time where, they had to be, the leash had to be shortened a little bit. And the one thing about Joel was he knew when players were going. And Patrick Kane, he wouldn't be scared to double shift him. And he wouldn't be scared. Johnny was a different animal because Johnny just blew everything out every shift. So for him to double shift, it would be hard. Whereas Kaner knew what to do and knew how to be responsible. Share a story about Kaner was why my first year in 2013, my first year there in Chicago, he says, we got to really get Kaner on board and this, that, in terms of playing without the puck. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? I said, he's been great so far. I said, put him out in that last minute. He's got the best hands. He's going to get that puck. He's going to curl it down the ice so it doesn't go for icing, or he's going to score an empty net goal. Like, give him that responsibility. He goes, yeah, I've done it before. And it just wasn't, he'd always come back and he'd leave me wanting more. He'd be out in the neutral zone. They'd score or they get a great chance and I'd be pissed off. And I don't want that. I said, so talk to him. So he talked to him about it. We'll give you this responsibility. And the one thing that Kaner did was he knew that if he took this responsibility, that was another minute, 2 minutes on the ice, another 10 points a season, easy for him. Like, he can put the puck in the net from the other end with his eyes closed, for crying out loud, or get the puck out to get it to someone else that's going to put it in the empty net. And that's responsibility. That's that trust that Mike was talking about, that partnership, that ability to know your players and allow them that. But it was interesting because last minute of the game, Kaner's out there. There was no problem. We never had a problem with him waiting out in the neutral zone or anything like that. He was right where he needed to be defensively because he knew that ice time, what do players crave? So, and I'll go off on a sidebar here. What do players crave? So at our level, players crave touches. They want touches. They want to touch the puck. They want as many touches as they can in a practice. So just think about your practice. They go up and down the ice. How many times do they really touch the puck? Like, Paul Maurice has been really good about incorporating different drills, and we've had to challenge ourselves as coaches to come up with different drills where they're touching the puck, where they're feeling the puck. Because when they touch the puck a lot, they feel confident. Once they feel confident, then you've got something. Then they're feeling confident. So what do? You play them more. You play them more. So with touches, with confidence, and then ultimately they want the ice time. So they want the ice time, but they want to be responsible with that ice time. And then at our level, as Babs knows, you get touches, you get ice time, then ultimately, what do? You get paid. So at our level, that's what it's all about for them. And, and for most players, that's what it is. They want to make sure that they're their best and they want to be the best. So to be the best, they want to get those touches so that they can feel confident, and then in turn helps the team win, but ultimately they get paid. And just a reminder that your best players are their best players. And Babs said that, but your best players want to be coached also. They want to know at times what they can be doing better. They want to be challenged. There's a reason why they're the best. There is. At times you just kind of, I've seen some coaches just leave their best players alone because they're their best. Well, no, they want to stay on top. They want to be the best. So they want to be challenged. There's something new that you can add into their after practice work. If there's always something. We got Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler, and they take 50 to 100 pucks off the boards every day before or after practice. And they know they need that. So it's second nature to them. Sorry, that's a sidebar there.
Now I know we're at the top of the hour here. Just guys, Mike and Jamie, are you able to stay on for a little longer? There's a few more questions that have been rolling in here.
I got 5 minutes. My son's standing at the door looking at me, so I got 5 minutes.
I got time, Dave. So
okay. So we'll roll here. So what qualities of those championship teams are most importantly translate to hockey, where it's cyclical, where players only have a few years in the program? So let's say minor hockey or other programs where you only have players for a couple of years.
Go ahead, Comper.
Well, I think it's important that you develop that. I think that partnership with the player, like get them to show trust, show that ability to trust them, but in turn it's a give and take. Like show them what you're capable of doing for them, help them, make them what they need, give them what they need, but at the same time, in turn, get what you need out of them. So that partnership is developed over those couple of years. That trust is developed. In Peter's situation, you got a four-year window, or in some cases a 5-year window to do that. In smaller sample sizes, you want to kind of get a list together and say, I'm going to help you guys get to this level or get to the next level. But you've got to help me get to this level with our team. So it's a give and take. You've got to, there are times in our practice at the NHL level that all of a sudden we'll just say, okay, you know what? We've had enough. We want to do some individual skills with our players. Paul, just call us over. Hey, let's get some individual skills with our players. And we break the ice up and away we go. And our players crave that. And so you change things up. And ultimately, the other thing is that to get them to compete at a high level, because there's nothing better than competing. We always play a game. We try and play a game at the end of every practice, if we can, depending on our schedule. And Paul will always look over at us as coaches and go, why didn't we just play the game for 10 minutes and get off the ice? Because they got more out of the game than they did out of practice. And it's so true because of that chirping that we talked about, that ability to want to win. Their competitiveness comes out. All the skills that you're trying to work on, you're working on in these competitive games.
I'll just jump in there. Comfort, real good answer. I think the idea is you want to help the players help themselves. And what I mean by that is, I think it's real important to have, if you got 23 players on the team like you do in the National Hockey League, you got 23 different ways to coach them. You want to coach them all fairly, but you have an individual plan for each one. And it isn't just set up by you, it's set up by them. So that's your early season meetings when you're sitting down with them. What 3 things do you want to get better at? That conversation, then you help them with the things you think they need to get better at. The two of you come to a plan, and you create a plan, and that can be with the strength coach, that can be with the skill development coach, that can be with your assistant coaches, that can be with you and the guy. But the idea to get better each and every day, part of it's in practice, part of it's the skill development after practice. The next part of that is the more competitive climate you create, the more accountability you create in that culture, and the harder they compete against one another, the better they're going to become. And I think what Comper said is so important. As soon as you put a game in and you keep score, the energy level goes through the roof. And that's what they want to do. They want to compete. And it doesn't matter if it's a one-on-one small ice game, a two-on-one, a forward versus the D, a line competition. It doesn't matter, but they want to compete. And that's where the fun is. That's where the fun in the game is anyway. And I don't think that matters at what level or how many years you have them. You can create that atmosphere. Guys, I got to step off. Like I said, Komper, great job. Peter, great job. And obviously, great cause here today. I went for an early water ski this morning just in honor of Kelly, just because I knew he'd love to do that. Thinking of you all, and proud to have gone to McGill University. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, Jamie, we got a couple more questions here. If you're good to keep rolling for a little bit.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, great. You talked about parking a loss after a game. And again, this think about maybe applying this to minor hockey as well. How do you teach young players to park a loss after a game?
I think it's about you let them know what's acceptable, what's not. I know that I think it's hard because you got to remember that the player takes on your personality as a coach, and that's really important. So if you're a village idiot, chances are your team's going to be village idiots. And that's really important to understand that. So if you're screaming and hollering and hooting at the referee, chances are they are. Now, it's different because minor hockey, I'll tell you, parents, oh boy. I applaud you for youth coaches that are out there. I applaud you. I do a youth hockey camp in St. Louis in the summer, and sometimes I just have to just go over and knock on the glass and yell at the parents because they're being village idiots. And so you gotta remember that talking with the parents is really important, and how they treat their kid, what they say to their player after a game. I know it's different, but you got to get that common message across. It's about respecting the game. I think that that's really important, and respecting your opponent and respecting the referee, and understanding that that's a key element in part of the process of being, you want to, I always go in every morning and I think about it. I want to make our players better, but I want to make them better players, but ultimately I want to make them better people. That's my goal, is to make them better people. So these young men, I can be proud of at the end of it. Maybe I had a little bit of an impact on where they're going, because there is life after hockey, and watching them perform on the ice and seeing them do something on the ice is as great as it is to say, hey, thanks for the input today, or thanks coach for passing the puck. Like that respect factor. I think that's really important. And for youth hockey, it's all the more critical, because if you don't do that at a young age, that's just going to fester. That's just going to continue to grow and grow and grow. And then they come to our level, and guess what? We've got to deal with it at our level. So I think it's a big onus. It's a big job, and you got to have a game plan for it. And I know I coached some youth programs, at the high school level. I had parents meeting, continuously having parents meeting, and then just reminding them what's acceptable, what's not. And then I did some summer programs where I'd have what I call a 24-hour rule. The parents weren't allowed to talk to me for 24 hours, which worked great because they thought it was great. And then they realized they couldn't talk to me about a game because we were playing too many games. So they couldn't talk to me the whole weekend, which was outstanding. So for me, it was great. But at the end of the day, I want to make sure that our as many times as possible, I remind the players what we're here for, is we're getting better together, not only as players, but as a team, but as individuals.
All right, now we have a couple more questions relating to the presentation itself. You talked about going best on best in practice to bring competition. How is player development of the less skilled and younger players addressed in practice?
Well, I think that it's the skill set. And I'm not saying best on best all the time, but for the most part, it was, we'd have Jonathan Taze's line against Michael Hanzus' line. Like, that's the way it went. And then there'd be some days where we go, okay, we're going to switch it up, and we'll put, the fourth line against the first line. And they want that. They crave that competition. And there are times where we mix it up. And when you have a roster as deep as the ones that we have, that you saw, and the trust that you have, Colin Fraser could go out against Kopitar and they'd have a great time against them. They'd compete against them, and they'd bring out Kopi's best, which was great. But also at the same time, when you get your best players, when you get Richards competing against Kopitar, you know it's going to be a best on best. But the other guys, they rise to the occasion. Those other players will rise to the occasion. And as far as skill development, like Mike said, everyone's different. So I've got a group of guys. It's amazing at our level. And at our level, I'll walk in, and I never want to do an individual meeting in my office, or I try not to do it in an environment where they're feeling uncomfortable. I like going into the dressing room. I sit in the dressing room with them one-on-one, and I'll show them their video. I'll show them maybe 5, 10, 15, whatever the clips are, or they'll come to me, hey, can you show me some video? So I'll go into their environment to make them feel comfortable. And you'd be surprised I start with one player, and there's 6 players looking over everybody's shoulder, trying to get in to see what I'm talking to the one player about. And it's not only that line of that player, it's our best players wondering what are they getting that I'm not getting, that they want to get better at. And so it's that relationship that you build, and then we go on the ice, and obviously the veterans have precedent, and they get their touches and they get what they need. And you do it with a young player, and then you build that relationship to the point where you just say, okay, you know what? This has been a month. Now you've got to wait. You've got to wait for me, and then you come to me. Come to me. I'm on the ice. I'm the last one off the ice. So I'll be there. I'll pass you pucks. I'll do whatever needs to be done for you to help get you better. I've got some ideas for you. You tell me your ideas, and then we'll meet in the middle. But you come to me. And so there'll be times where, early on where, hey, why weren't you out on the ice? Oh, I forgot. Young kids, I forgot. And then you start getting that relationship, and they'll stay on the ice. And they stay on the ice to the point where you got to kick them off the ice, because it starts with 1, then you have 3, and then you have 4. And maybe those 4 players don't need that, but we do that for that one player, and then we do something else for the other player. So it's helping everyone, and it's building that team bond throughout our team.
So just a follow-up to that one, and it refers to accountability. So what do you do if your leaders aren't driving the bus in practice? And this can be transferable to some other domains as well. So let's say business or other sports. What if your leaders aren't pulling their weight? If they're not the ones who are leading in practice, what do you do?
Well, I think for us, there's something going on. So we, at practice, our job obviously as assistants is to make sure we're that buffer. We find out, we're around the room beforehand, we're having coffee, and there's a time where you might just go to the head coach, hey, what's going on? Did so-and-so talk to you today? Is there a medical issue? The relationships that we have with our strength and conditioning coach, our equipment guys, our medical guys, it's so critical, because they've got a finger on the pulse also besides us. And we might find out a nugget that, hey, he just got a speeding ticket, or his dog just died, or something happened where he's not at his best. So we want to know what's going on. So we might slide over in line. Hey, where are you at today? Maybe my legs are heavy. Maybe I had a hard game that night. He goes, it's okay. But if they're loafing, Daryl would have no problem calling him out. He'll call him out in practice, and he'll call everyone in, and then he'll call the player out. Like, that's old school, and that's the way Daryl was. It didn't mean that he didn't like you. He wanted to get more out of you. He wanted to get the most out of you that he could. Now, in today's game, like Mike said, there's 23 different personalities. So what gets through to that personality of that player? What gets through to that leader? So I'm not going to talk to Blake Wheeler the way I'm going to talk to Mark Scheifele, the way I'm going to talk to Dustin Bufflin or Josh Morrison. And that's same with Jonathan Toews, Marian Hossa, Patrick Kane. They're all unique in how you have to deal with them. And you've got to figure out their trigger points in terms of how you're dealing with them. And I think that that's really important. And that's you as a coach, and that's you as your assistants. That's important that you find out. But to get to your question, you got to slide over there as an assistant coach. You've got to be perceptive. You just can't be pushing pucks. You got to know who's on, who's not, and then try and get them to that level just to either get through practice if they are lagging, or if there is something going on. And at our level, we have to know what's going on too. You got to know when you've played 3 and 4 nights. You got to know when the rookie party was, a day ago or 2 days ago, where you're having one of those practices that they just got to get it out of them. You're not even coaching. You're just blowing your whistle and laughing at them and having fun with them. Do you know what I mean? So there are times like that. But I've been very fortunate with our players and the organizations that I've been in. that you look at the list of leaders we had, whether it's Al McInnes, Chris Pronger, Pierre Turgeon, Scott Mellenby, Dallas Drake in St. Louis. Then you go to LA, all the leaders that I talked about there that they've had or wore A's or C's in different organizations, and then Chicago. And now here in Winnipeg, we're fortunate. And now we've got some young players that want to be first. We got a Kyle Connor that was, he was so bashful. Now he wants to be first in every drill. He wants to be that leader. And that's a tribute to his growth and development by the confidence that we've given him and we've shown him, because it sure wasn't that way to start, let me tell you.
And just a further note on that accountability point, and especially for minor hockey coaches, talking about using ice time for accountability, and then maybe some other tools of persuasion that you use at your level where players are making a lot of money. How do you hold them accountable? I know you touched on a couple of points there, but then also maybe some tips for minor hockey coaches that they can use.
Well, I think everybody wants ice time. That's the bottom line. Everybody does want ice time, and that's the hammer that all coaches have. So I can tell you on more than one occasion, coaches that I've been that I've worked with, they've had no problem. And myself as a head coach, if our top players aren't going, I sit them. Just sit them a rotation. Sit them 2 rotations. Now everybody on the bench knows they're being held accountable. It's not so much what you're doing to that player. It's what you're doing to the bench. And you got to remember that. The impact that you have by doing that to the bench is like, okay, everybody is held accountable. It's just like Daryl yelling at me during a video meeting. Like, he's holding me accountable to make sure that I've got my stuff together. And now that means that everybody is not off limits. And I think that that's really important. And the next shift usually is their best shift. And then it keeps getting better after that. Every time they get on the ice or touch the ice, it gets better for them. So I think that that's really important, that ice time. And then maybe it's just call a player in between periods. You call them in, or you pull them aside, or you talk to them on the bench. I think there's a time where you've got to know you can't embarrass them. That's the one thing that I learned from Joel. He never embarrassed his players, never embarrassed anyone or called them out in the media. He'd never embarrass a player, or never, if you want to call taking ice time away, well, if that's an embarrassment, well, then that's on the player. He's got to respond to that. But he'd never publicly say anything derogatory towards the player. Now, in youth hockey, I think ice time is the big thing, is the key. If you're playing in a competitive sport you're not playing house league where everyone just goes. And if it's house league, well, then you got to live with what level you're coaching at. But there is got to be some accountability, that they understand the rules, they understand about being good teammates and everything like that. But at the end of the day, if you're playing in a AAA or a AA situation where you're playing in a competitive sport where your coaches are there for you, you got 2 or 3 coaches on the ice, they've got to be held accountable. And whether it's ice time, whether it's talking to them in front of the team and just saying, hey, this is unacceptable. We got to get our head out of our butts and let's get going here. We've got an hour of ice time. And I think the way to put it is that this ice time is really important to us because you don't get a lot of it. At the NHL, we get unlimited amount of ice time. We can stay on the ice for 2-3 hours, whatever we want. We can stay on the ice. In minor hockey, you don't have that ability. You've got allotted time and you got to get on and off the ice. So it's got to be productive throughout that. And those touches that the players get and that trust that you build with the players at the youth organization, you want to get them to that next level. And it's, like I said, it's got to be a partnership to help get them there.
All right, just maybe 2 more questions here. Really thankful for your time here, Jamie. I know you spent a lot of time on this. So a couple more. One relating to mentorship. And it says the leaders and the guys, you spoke about mentorship, the leaders and the guys sacrificing, but how much does will play a role, and how can you instill the will to want it more? And so I guess adding on to that a little bit is can you teach guys to be mentors, or is it something that's more innate?
I think a lot of it's innate, and I think a lot of it, like Anze Kopitar, I can say that a lot has been because of Michael Handzus. I think he is a mentor now to his young players. He's a captain of the Los Angeles Kings, and he takes that very serious. And It's what he does in practice, his practice habits. It's what he does off the ice, how he takes care of himself. It's all those little things. It's all encompassing. And I think that if you have the right people, that you surround yourself with the right people, or surround the environment that you are trying to get to, that identity that you're trying to get to, if you surround it with the right people, I think that's going to help bring that to the forefront. And I by Michael Handzus and Jonathan Toews, I always say him, unbelievable will. Now, can that come out? Does it come out in practice? Does it come out in how hard they compete? So if you do have those players in those competitive games like Babs was talking to, that flows the juices, that gets them outside their comfort zone. I think it's all about pushing players. Like Daryl always said, okay is not okay. It's not okay. Don't be okay. Be better than okay. Expect more from yourself. So as coaches and as leaders, we want to push them outside their comfort zone. We want to challenge them to be better. We want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to get them outside that comfort zone, so that when it comes game time, they're comfortable being uncomfortable. So they're in those situations. They've been in those situations, and they get that experience of that. So I think that's really important. And I'll just share a story, if you don't mind, Dave, about Jonathan Toews. So when we lost out in Portland in the third round, and I was always tight with Joel and Kitch, and Joel said, "Hey, you gotta watch our games." That was in 15. He says, "You gotta watch our games, okay? If you got nothing going, watch our games. I want you to be a part of it. I want you to help me. I want you to just tell me what you see." I said, "Okay, no problem." And so we'd be in constant communication. And then the finals, he had me at the games. I went to Chicago. I flew to Chicago. After the game, I go down to the dressing room, and everybody knows who I was. I'm not that I'm a big wheel or anything, but I just walked in through the dressing room. And as I'm walking in, this door flings open. So we have two doors. There's a little area. There's two doors. So there's one door where you walk in, and then there's a little space where all the trophies are and that. And there's another door into the main dressing room. And the guy almost broke my arm. Like, I went to open the door, and the guy almost broke my arm. He comes flying out, and sure enough, it's Taser. And I hadn't seen Jonathan in a year, and he just won the Stanley Cup. He just got off the ice. He's still sweating. They're celebrating. He's in his full equipment, and he stops and he goes, "Jamie, oh my God, how are you?" And he spent, I'm going to say 3 minutes to 5 minutes with me, asking me about how I was. He just won the Stanley Cup for the third time. This is the captain of the Chicago Blackhawks. He just got off the ice, won at home. And here he is talking to me. I go, "Where were you going?" He goes, "It's not important. Don't worry about it. They can wait. I want to know about you." And those are true leaders. Those guys, they bring everyone, they make everyone feel a part of it. And that's one of my favorite stories ever, because Jonathan Toews made me feel a part of something that I wasn't really a part of, but he valued our relationship from the 2 years I spent with him. And every time they come to Winnipeg, he makes sure that he comes to see me, and his parents sit right behind the bench, and they're always so friendly and say hi to me. But it's those type of players, they're very special. And if you get one of those type of players, you gotta tap him for everything that he's worth, and make sure that he'll make the other players around him better. It's through what he does and how he presents himself and how he treats other people.
Thanks for that one. And then, so just one last question to close off would be, you've worked with some outstanding head coaches, Paul Maurice, Daryl Sutter, Joel Quenneville. If you think about the different coaching styles, do you think that any style of coaching can work, and it depends on the way you install your way of doing things, or is it a matter of adapting to your group?
I really believe that it's a give and take. It's about who you are. I think you've got to evolve as a coach. I know I have over the years, and I think you've got to be willing to evolve. You can bend, but don't break. You still have to hold true to who you are, but you have to get a sense of what your team is and who your team is. And you got to, the one thing that I've learned now is that I'm really excited about where we're at in Winnipeg, because it reminds me a lot of where we were in Los Angeles, how we're drafting and developing, and we're getting closer to that pinnacle of where we want to get to. And I think as coaches, especially in our situations where we do move around, is you want to get yourself as a head coach, you're going to an environment where you know that your style is going to fit. And now that's not true with your youth players. Obviously, it's the hand you're dealt or who you're choosing. But at the end of the day, you've got an opportunity to impart a lot on them, and in turn, they're going to impart a lot on you. They're going to try your patience. They're going to test your patience, but you're going to learn from them every day. As much as they learn from you, you got to be open-minded and learn from them. And that's one thing that's great about the game. It's fluid. It's always changing. So you have to be ready to adapt, but you still have to hold true to your core values. And I think you can, you look at Babs. Babs is a great example. He's won at every level. And has he had to adapt? Yeah, he said, well, sure. He's had the best players when you go to Team Canada and the Olympic team and those type of things. He's had to adapt, but he still holds true to what he believes in. Like he said, Joel, he's going to change the defense and be a stick cop. Well, he delegates and he knows what people are good at, and he puts them in those roles. It's the delegation and the ability to use your staff and believe in what you're imparting on your players, and in turn, what the players are imparting on you.
That's fantastic. And Jamie, thank you for taking the time. We've had a lot of positive feedback. I've been getting messages through the whole presentation here. Thanks a lot for spending the time, Peter. Thank you. Again, positive messages from both of you. So just a reminder, it's been an amazing day for everyone. I think the insights that you guys have shared has been fantastic. And just a reminder for everyone else on the line, tomorrow morning, we'll be back at it at 9 o'clock in French from 9 until noon, and with Ken Morin as the host. And then I'll be back on at noon till 3 tomorrow, and we'll take off right where we left off. So again, thanks for joining us today. Lots of great stuff, and look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.
Thanks very much to everyone. I really appreciate it. And thanks, Dave, for letting me be a part of this.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.